could all be here. My name is Scott Aiken. I'm the National Native American Programs Coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under the headquarters office.
Yeah, we're here. So
I'm Prairie Band Potawatomi from Northeast Kansas. I say bonjour. Thank you for being here. Good morning. I'm from the Fish Clan of my tribe, and my parents and grandparents. My grandfather was Prairie Band. My grandmother was Citizen Band Potawatomi, and we're originally from the Great Lakes area. So, wolf is certainly an important, culturally significant species to my community and myself. I just want to remind folks before we begin that we'll be recording today's call. That a transcript will also be created from this discussion that will be posted so that you can take a look at that with any information that you might have recollection of that you want to follow up on, so we can certainly get that down on the record. I want to remind everyone that this is a consultation effort on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's part in conjunction with our sister programs and agencies through the BIA and through the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs. We're grateful they're on today with us. This has been a long, challenging process over the years that we all have worked on this, and we're grateful again that you can take time out of your busy week to listen to what we have to share and give us feedback either today on the call, or you may submit it in writing as well. Again, this is for federally recognized tribes only. So when you speak, please indicate who you're representing, which tribe you're representing, and that will be helpful for our court reporter as she does the transcript. You can raise your hand virtually on Zoom. I think we're getting pretty savvy, all of us, over these many months and years of doing this now. So we'll do our best to be respectful of one another using the virtual hand raise. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we can start this recording now before I dive into this.
Recording in progress.
On April 17th of 2021, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service published a 90-day finding on 2 petitions to list a distinct population segment of the gray wolf in the northern Rocky Mountains or in the western United States under the Endangered Species Act of 1973, as amended. Our finding concluded that the petitions presented substantial information indicating that the petition actions may be warranted. So therefore, we have initiated a status review to determine whether the petitioned actions are warranted. No decision regarding whether or not to list the gray wolf in these DPS's, distinct population segments, has yet been made. We anticipate, though, delivering a 12-month finding with this listing determination to the Federal Register in fall of this year. So we wanted to reach out as early as we can, and today is a representation of that. And again, grateful for your time, and as well as the people that I'll introduce to you who are our principals within the administration who are keenly aware and keeping an eye on this process that we're undergoing here today. Let me start by introducing from the Department of Interior, our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Asia for the Assistant Secretary's Office for Indian Affairs, Wizapan Garriott, and for any comments you might like to offer at the beginning here, please.
I greet each and every one of you with a good heart. My name is Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, and we are pleased to join Bureau, and really looking forward to learning and listening to the comments today and to supporting this effort overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us today. And the next person I would like to introduce is our director for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Director Martha Williams. And Director Williams, if you'd like to say a few words and remarks.
Thank you, Scott, as always. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this consultation. And it's very heartening to see the strong participation and representation on this call. My name is Martha Williams, and I'm the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, which means that I oversee the service's operations, budget, policy, and work so closely with the leadership of the department, including the Secretary, Assistant Secretary Newland, Principal Deputy Assistant Garrett, who, thank you so much for being on the call, and others to achieve our mission and the priorities of this administration. I do want to acknowledge and recognize that today I'm calling from Washington, D.C., on the ancestral lands of the Anacostan and Piscataway tribes. As the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service, one of my priorities, really key priorities, is to strengthen our relationship with sovereign tribal nations by engaging in meaningful consultation, such as the one we are holding today regarding the gray wolf in the Western U.S. I also want to strengthen our relationships well beyond consultation, but understand it's a very important first step. Our agency understands that tribal sovereignty and self-governance, as well as honoring the federal trust responsibility with tribal nations, must be the cornerstone of federal Indian policy. The wolf is an iconic, yet sometimes, I would say most of the time, controversial example of the endangered species act.
Sure that
in preventing extinction and in promoting recovery. Because of years of sustained cooperative efforts of federal, state agencies, tribes, non-governmental entities, many in the public, wolves are making an impressive recovery in many parts of their historic range. And throughout their range, wolves are keystone predators and have a profound effect on the ecosystems they inhabit. The wide range of habitats in which wolves can thrive reflects their adaptability as a species. So thank you for being here today. I would certainly look forward to further discussion and consultation on the status of gray wolves in the West. And I'll turn it over to the Fish and Wildlife Service's Regional Director, Matt Hogan, and can move forward in the process from there. Thank you.
Do you have any of the waffles?
Hey, Scott, you're on mute, but I'm wondering, before I go, if it's possible to follow up on that comment from Andrea about muting, because we're difficult for folks to hear. I think that's
going through.
Are you not getting them today at all?
So,
You didn't go.
there we go. That was our one potential outlier. Please help us out here and keep these muted until you speak. I think that I'll continue to go through this and double check.
okay. Thanks, Scott.
So with that, Matt, please introduce yourself and then take it away with regard to the presentation.
Yeah, good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending upon where you sit in the country. Thanks for joining us. Just to echo Martha and Lizzie and Scott's thoughts about sharing some of your time with us today. So I'm joined by two of my colleagues. So I'm the regional director for the Fish and Wildlife Service in what we call the Mountain Prairie region, based out of Denver. I'm joined by two other regional directors who we also work with closely on Western wolves. Hugh Morrison, who is from Region 1 of the Fish and Wildlife Service, based in Portland, and Paul Souza, who's based in Sacramento in Region 8 for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we work closely together, all three regions, on shared management and conservation of this species. So I've got just two fairly quick PowerPoint slides just to inform everyone about where we are in the process, where we've come, and then what still lies ahead. And then we will kick it over to Scott, who will facilitate a conversation. So Alex, whenever you're ready, if you could show the slides, that'd be great. All right, hopefully everyone can see those slides. So if you could go to the first slide, Alex, that'd be great. So as Scott mentioned, in July of last year, the Fish and Wildlife Service received 2 petitions requesting Endangered Species Act protection for gray wolves in the western U.S., largely based on changes in harvest regulations in the state of Montana and Idaho, among other factors. So just a little bit about the service's process. So once the service receives a petition, we begin working on the first step to make what we call a 90-day finding. And the reason it's called a 90-day finding is ideally we try to make that finding within 90 days of receiving the petitions. It doesn't always happen because of the tremendous workload our folks have, but we endeavor to stay as close to that deadline as possible. And in the 90-day finding, we're asked to make an assessment as to whether or not the petitioners presented substantial information to suggest that listing the species may be warranted. And we can only use the information in the petition when we make that determination. So in September of 2021, we issued a positive 90-day finding indicating that listing may be warranted for wolves in the western United States. So we are now conducting our own analysis of the species status using the best available scientific and commercial information to determine whether listing wolves in the western United States under the Endangered Species Act is warranted. Second, please. After receiving a petition and making a positive 90-day finding, we typically produce what we call a species status assessment, also abbreviated as an SSA, which is a summary of the biological information on the species and an evaluation of the species' current and future condition. In the case of the wolf, this SSA will analyze the potential effect of the regulatory changes I mentioned earlier on wolf population sizes in the future. Once the SSA is complete, the next step is to use that information to arrive at a decision as to whether listing is warranted. We publish and explain the decision regarding whether listing is warranted in a regulatory document called the 12-month finding. So you can see the steps of where we are, the steps we follow, and the dark blue SSA is where we are at this point. So as I said, we're currently in the SSA phase of that. In the coming weeks, we are planning to share a draft of biological information in the SSA for a blind and independent peer review by identified subject matter experts. The service is also in the process of attempting to collect traditional ecological knowledge for incorporation into our SSA analysis, given that we recognize that tribes may have a deep spiritual, historical, and cultural connection to wolves, and believe that traditional ecological knowledge is important when we evaluate the status of a species under the Act. So these efforts to collect traditional ecological knowledge include conducting elder interviews, ethnographic studies, and meeting with tribes to gather additional information. Next slide, please, Alex. So you see the same slide here, and then basically the outcomes. So there's 3 potential outcomes for the Fish and Wildlife Service to reach after we conclude our SSA at what we call our 12-month finding. So the 12-month finding is basically the document that we issue that indicates our decision. So the first potential outcome is not warranted for listing under the Act, in which case no further action by the Fish and Wildlife Service would be required. The second potential outcome would be warranted but precluded by other species that need our attention sooner, in which case the species would go on the candidate list for future action. The third potential finding is warranted for listing, in which case we would immediately follow up with proposed rulemaking as we move ahead. So decision makers will use the information in the SSA to inform their recommendation about whether wolves in the western U.S. or the NRM meet the definition of a threatened or endangered species. And finally, we anticipate publishing our 12-month findings sometime in the fall of 2022. So with that, I saw someone named Matt to mute. I hope you weren't asking me to mute myself, because that would have been hard to make remarks. I'm assuming it might have been someone else who's off mute. But with that, that's the end of the formal presentation, and I'll turn it back to Scott to facilitate the conversation from there. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Scott.
Great, thank you, Matt. I think with regard to the presentation that you just did, Matt, I'm about to ask this last time, are we posting that then to a specific site that folks might be able to get a copy of that if they choose to?
We can certainly do that, or we can post it in the chat here as well. So
yeah, maybe that would be the most convenient. I'd like to recognize two other of Matt's colleagues from different regions. So we have